Story 1. The Phantom Caller. Samantha had been working at a 24-hour call center for over 3 years. She enjoyed the night shift because it was quieter, allowing her to focus and often letting her leave work with her mind still fresh. The calls mostly came in from people dealing with technical issues, but occasionally, strange calls came through. One in particular had haunted her for years. It was a typical night, and Samantha was halfway through her shift. The office was dimly lit, the only sound being the occasional hum of conversation from her colleagues, all spaced out in the large room. The clock read 2:35 a.m. when her phone rang. She glanced at her computer screen. It was an anonymous number, not unusual for her line of work. She answered with her usual upbeat tone. "Thank you for calling. This is Samantha. How can I help you?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Not uncommon. Sometimes people needed a moment to gather their thoughts, especially in the middle of the night. She was patient. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Still, no response. Instead, she heard something faint in the background, almost like soft breathing, or maybe the hum of wind through trees, but there was no voice. After a moment, the line went dead. Samantha shrugged and dismissed it as a prank or accidental call, but within minutes, the phone rang again. This time, the number was withheld completely. She hesitated, but picked up. "Hello, this is Samantha." Again, silence. Only this time, the breathing on the other end was clearer, and she could swear it was human. It was slow, methodical, and unnerving. She repeated, "Is there something I can help you with?" A voice, barely audible, whispered, "Help me." Samantha froze. Her instincts told her something was wrong, but protocol required her to try to engage. "Where are you? Can you tell me what's wrong?" There was a pause, and then the whisper came again, more urgent this time. "Help me. Please." The hair on the back of her neck stood up. Something about the voice. It was childlike, frightened, but too distorted to make out if it was a boy or girl. "Where are you?" she asked again. The line went dead. Samantha stared at the phone, her pulse racing. She immediately reported the calls to her supervisor, who checked the records. The calls hadn't come from any of the company's usual channels. There was no trace of the numbers in their system. Over the next few nights, the same thing happened. A call would come through, an indistinct whisper begging for help, and the line would go dead. The frequency increased, and so did the desperation in the voice. But each time, there was no way to trace the origin. Finally, after a particularly disturbing call where the voice sobbed uncontrollably before abruptly cutting out, Samantha couldn't take it anymore. She contacted the police. They conducted an investigation, but found nothing. The calls couldn't be traced. No other employees reported similar incidents. The calls stopped after that night. But even years later, Samantha still hears that whisper in her nightmares, the pleading voice asking for help, a cry that would forever remain unanswered. Story 2. The Hospital's Shadow Man. Nathan was a security guard at a local hospital, working the graveyard shift. The hospital was old, parts of it dating back to the early 1900s, with long, deserted hallways and eerie, flickering lights that created unsettling shadows around every corner. Most of the time, his job was uneventful. An occasional patient wandering the halls, or doctors and nurses working the late shift. But one night changed everything. It was around 3 a.m. when Nathan was patrolling the West Wing, which had been mostly abandoned after a new wing had been built. It was dark, with only emergency lighting illuminating the hallways. He had always found this part of the hospital creepy, but he had never experienced anything out of the ordinary. Until that night. As he rounded a corner near the old surgery wing, he saw a figure standing at the end of the hall. The man was tall, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned hospital gown. Nathan's first thought was that it was a patient who had wandered off, but something about the man's posture was off. He was standing completely still, staring straight ahead. Nathan called out, "Sir, are you lost? Can I help you?" No response. He took a few steps closer, and that's when the figure moved, but not in a normal way. It didn't turn or shift weight. Instead, it seemed to slide sideways, disappearing into a nearby room. Nathan's heart raced, but his training kicked in. He walked quickly to the room, flashlight in hand, and peered inside. The room was empty. No beds, no equipment, no one there. Confused, he stepped inside, scanning every corner. The room hadn't been used in years, thick layers of dust coating the floor, undisturbed. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a noise from the hallway, a faint shuffle. Nathan stepped back out, but the hallway was empty again. His nerves were on edge now, but he continued his patrol. For the next few nights, the figure appeared again, always standing at the end of the hall, always disappearing when Nathan got too close. But no matter how fast he chased or how closely he followed, the figure would vanish without a trace. One night, determined to get to the bottom of it, Nathan set up a camera in the hallway, pointing directly at the spot where the figure always appeared. He watched the footage live from his station, eyes glued to the monitor. Around 3:15 a.m., the shadowy figure appeared again, right on cue. But when Nathan looked at the screen, his blood ran cold. The figure was there, standing just as it had every night. But on the monitor, it had no face. It was just a dark, featureless shadow. And then, without warning, it turned and walked toward the camera, faster than before. Nathan bolted from his desk, running down the hall toward the camera. But by the time he got there, the figure was gone. The next morning, he handed in his resignation. Story 3. The Cursed Convenience Store. Olivia worked the night shift at a small 24-hour convenience store in a quiet part of town. Most of the time, the job was slow, with only the occasional customer coming in to grab snacks or cigarettes. But one particular week, something strange began happening, starting with the arrival of an odd customer. It was around 2 a.m. when a man walked in. He was tall, thin, and dressed in outdated clothing, like something out of the 1970s. His face was pale, almost ashen, and his eyes were sunken, with deep bags beneath them. Olivia greeted him as she would any other customer, but he didn't respond. Instead, he walked slowly through the aisles, not picking anything up or even looking at the shelves. After a few minutes, the man approached the counter, but didn't place anything down. He just stared at her, his dark eyes unblinking. Feeling uncomfortable, Olivia asked, "Can I help you with something?" The man leaned forward slightly and whispered, "It's coming." Before she could respond, he turned and walked out of the store without another word. Shaken, Olivia brushed it off as a weird encounter, but over the next few nights, strange things began happening. The lights would flicker uncontrollably, even though the power had never been an issue before. Items would fall off the shelves for no apparent reason. And on more than one occasion, she heard footsteps behind her, only to turn and find no one there. The worst of it came one night when she was restocking shelves. She heard a loud crash from the storage room in the back. Thinking someone had broken in, she grabbed a broom as a makeshift weapon and cautiously entered the room. The storage area was a mess, boxes and items scattered everywhere, but no one was there. Then she noticed it. On the far wall, scratched into the wood, were the words, "It's here." She quit the next morning and never looked back.